What is it like to grow up at the very center of Hollywood's golden age, in a world of legendary movie stars, glamorous parties, and dazzling creative energy? And what happens when that magical, sun-drenched world is suddenly and irrevocably shattered by a single brutal act of violence? In his powerful, intimate, and deeply moving memoir, The Friday Afternoon Club, the actor and director Griffin Dunne takes us on a journey into the heart of his remarkable and tragic family. It is a story of a magical, bygone era of Hollywood, a world that most of us have only ever dreamed of. But it is also a heartbreaking story of a sister's murder, of a family's inconsolable grief, and of a father's incredible transformation in the face of a failed justice system. A transformation that would turn him from a novelist into one of America's most famous and important crusaders for victims' rights. This is not just a celebrity memoir. It is a profound philosophical journey into the heart of a family, and a powerful look at how we can find a new and unexpected purpose in the crucible of our deepest pain. The Friday Afternoon Club, a Hollywood Camelot. To understand the tragedy, you first have to understand the magic. The story begins in the Beverly Hills of the 1960s and 70s, a time that has come to be known as New Hollywood, and at the very center of the social and creative universe of that era was the Dunne family. The patriarch, Dominique Dunne, was a successful film producer and writer. The matriarch, Ellen, or Lenny, was a beautiful and vivacious heiress. Together they hosted some of the most legendary parties in Hollywood. Their home was the meeting place for a dazzling array of movie stars, directors, and literary icons. Griffin Dunne, the author of this memoir, describes a childhood where it was normal to find people like Paul Newman, Elizabeth Taylor, or his godmother Natalie Wood casually lounging by their pool. The name of the book comes from the family's most iconic social ritual, the Friday Afternoon Club. This was a regular, informal gathering at their home, a place where the biggest names in the industry could come to relax, to gossip, and to be themselves, away from the prying eyes of the press. It was, in its own way, a kind of Hollywood Camelot, a golden age of creativity, glamour, and success. And at the heart of this world were the three Dunne children, Griffin, his brother Alex, and his younger sister, Dominique. They were the kids in the picture, growing up in this extraordinary and often surreal environment. They were not just passive observers of this world, they were becoming a part of it. Griffin was launching his career as a successful actor and producer, and Dominique, the youngest, was a bright and rising star. The rising star and the shadow. Dominique Dunne was, by all accounts, a luminous presence. She was beautiful, talented, and had a deep, empathetic soul. After a series of small roles, she landed her breakout part in the 1982 blockbuster horror film, Poltergeist. She played the older sister, Dana, the one who is attacked by the supernatural forces in the house. The movie was a massive hit, and at age 22, Dominique was on the verge of becoming a major Hollywood star. The Dunne family seemed to be on the cusp of becoming a true Hollywood dynasty. But as her professional life was taking off, a dark shadow was emerging in her personal life. She had begun a relationship with a charming and handsome young man named John Sweeney, who worked as a chef at one of Los Angeles' trendiest restaurants, Ma Maison. At first the relationship seemed perfect. Sweeney was charismatic and attentive, but soon, a more sinister side began to emerge. He was intensely jealous and possessive. He began to try and control every aspect of Dominique's life, who she could see, what roles she could take. The relationship became volatile and eventually violent. He physically assaulted her on several occasions. Dominique, a strong and independent young woman, found the courage to end the abusive relationship. She changed the locks on her West Hollywood home and tried to move on with her life, but Sweeney would not let go. He began to stalk her, to harass her, to beg her to take him back. And then on the night of October 30th, 1982, just a few days before Halloween, he showed up at her house. The night the light went out. What happened that night is the heartbreaking and catastrophic event that shatters the Dunne family and changes their lives forever. Dominique was at home rehearsing for a new TV series with a fellow actor. Sweeney showed up demanding to talk to her. To avoid a scene, Dominique agreed to speak with him on her front porch. A few moments later, her co-star heard a terrible argument, followed by the sounds of a struggle, and then, a chilling silence. When he went outside, he found Dominique on the ground, unconscious. John Sweeney was standing over her. He had strangled her, so violently and for so long that he had deprived her brain of oxygen. Dominique was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. She was in a coma, with no brain activity. She would never wake up. 5 days later, her family made the agonizing decision to take her off life support. She was 22 years old. The bright rising star of the Dunne family had been extinguished in a single, brutal act of domestic violence. The golden age was over. The nightmare had begun. The travesty of justice in a Los Angeles courtroom. The murder of Dominique Dunne was a horrific and senseless tragedy, but for the Dunne family, the nightmare was about to get worse. The second half of the Friday Afternoon Club is a gripping and infuriating account of their journey through the American justice system. A journey that would leave them feeling completely and utterly failed. The trial of John Sweeney was a travesty from the very beginning. The Dunne family quickly realized that the judge assigned to the case, Judge Burton Katz, was openly sympathetic to the defense. He made a series of rulings that systematically dismantled the prosecution's case. He refused to allow testimony about Sweeney's history of abusing Dominique, ruling that it would be prejudicial. He refused to allow Sweeney's ex-girlfriend to testify that he had also been violent with her. The defense attorney, a notoriously aggressive lawyer, painted a picture of Sweeney not as a violent abuser but as a tragic, heartbroken boy next door who had simply been pushed too far by a moment of passion. He argued that this was not a murder, but a crime of passion. A tragic accident. The Dunne family was forced to sit in the courtroom day after day and listen to this victim-blaming narrative. They had to endure the sight of their daughter's killer being portrayed as the real victim. It was a second, profound, and deeply painful violation. In the end, the judge's rulings left the jury with very few options. They could not convict Sweeney of first-degree murder. The final verdict was a slap in the face. John Sweeney was found guilty of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to just 6 years in prison. For the brutal and deliberate murder of Dominique Dunne, he would serve only 3.5 years before being released on parole. The Dunne family was devastated. They had come to the court seeking justice, and instead, they had found a system that seemed to value the life of their daughter very little. The justice system had failed them completely and totally. The birth of a crusader, the transformation of Dominique Dunne. But it is in the crucible of this terrible injustice that the final and most extraordinary part of the story begins. It is the story of the transformation of Dominique Dunne. Before the trial, Dominick's own career had stalled. He had left the world of movie producing and was trying to make it as a novelist. He was, in many ways, a lost soul. But the experience of sitting in that courtroom every day, watching the travesty of justice unfold, lit a fire in him. He was a writer, and he realized he had a new story to tell. He began to keep a journal of the trial, a raw, angry, and deeply personal account of his family's experience. He wrote about the legal tricks, the victim blaming, and the profound sense of powerlessness he felt. After the trial, he sent the journal to the editor of the magazine Vanity Fair. They published it under the powerful and simple title, Justice. The article was a sensation. It was a raw, honest, and powerful piece of journalism that gave a voice to the silent, frustrated rage of countless victims of crime who had been failed by the system. And in that moment, Dominique Dunne found his new calling. He became a special correspondent for Vanity Fair, and for the next several decades, he became one of the most famous and important journalists in America. He dedicated his life to covering the sensational trials of the rich and powerful, from the Menendez brothers to O.J. Simpson. But he always wrote from a unique perspective, the perspective of the victim. He saw himself as a crusader, an advocate for the people that the legal system so often forgot. The murder of his daughter was the greatest tragedy of his life, but it also, paradoxically, gave him his life's true purpose. He took his own private, unbearable grief, and he transformed it into a powerful public voice for justice. The man who had once hosted glamorous Hollywood parties was now a fearless journalist, sitting in the courtroom taking meticulous notes and speaking truth to power. He had found his ultimate and most meaningful role. The final message of The Friday Afternoon Club is a story of two distinct and almost separate lives. There is the sun-drenched, glamorous, and often magical life of the first half. And there is the dark, tragic, and ultimately purposeful life of the second half. It is a book about the incredible resilience of the human spirit. It is a testament to the power of a family's love to endure the unimaginable. And it is a profound and moving story about how sometimes it is only in our darkest and most painful moments that we can discover our true and most authentic selves. It is a deep inquiry into the nature of tragedy and the human capacity to transform it into a new and powerful purpose. If you believe that we can find our greatest strength in our deepest wounds, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to explore the powerful stories that reveal the true nature of the human experience.